I will, Leo.
Yep,
You're always a step ahead of me, Leo.
just barely.
Step three, the step three prayer. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Thank you, Rob. And I know it's already been said, but we are going to start on page 20. We're going to go up. There's a short paragraph just prior to the types of drinkers that we're going to be covering here at the beginning. But Rob, if you will go ahead, we'll kind of kick this off with now these are commonplace observations.
You got it, Leo. Now, these are commonplace observations on drinkers, which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours.
Yeah, so let's go ahead. What we're going to do here, and I'm kind of, that's probably a half step. I think we're just covering some of the common statements or phrases that people make and do, and the things like lay off the hard stuff. Why don't you try beer and wine instead of liquor? The fellow can't handle his liquor. He could stop if he wanted to. Things like that are things that are coming from folks that are ignorant, and I mean that sincerely, not as a derogatory term, but just not that versed on alcoholism and the types of drinkers that are out there and the kind of people that we are as alcoholics. So what we're going to cover now is kind of a highlight area of the types of drinkers that we're talking about here. And certainly we're going to get into the type of drinker that we actually are, and that is the real alcoholic. Let's go ahead and take them one type at a time, Rob.
You got it. Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone.
Yeah, and this is one of the more baffling types of people as far as I'm concerned. They are the normal people out there. By and large, that's the majority of those out there that are drinkers. There is a population that we don't actually cover here, and that is the complete non-drinker, somebody that doesn't drink at all, regardless of the situation or the event. But the moderate drinker has little trouble in giving up liquor entirely. I'm going to go ahead and branch out here just a little bit. My wife is like that. She is a drinker and has a couple of drinks that she prefers, but she can go for as long as a year or more and not even think twice about drinking. When it does present itself, it's usually at a holiday or type of family gathering where there might be a couple of bottles of open wine or something like that, and she'll have 1 to 3 glasses over a given period of time, and then that's it. And sometimes she'll even leave wine in the glass, which again is just something that we're not used to as far as that's concerned. So the moderate drinker in this case is somebody that is what we call a normal drinker, somebody that might drink socially, can go for days, weeks, months, or even longer without a drink, and can stop on a dime without any hesitation whatsoever and not miss it at all. And it's one of those types of people that we had aspired to. It's one of the obsessions that alcoholics have, and that is to drink like normal people. So we'll cover that too as we kind of get closer to that. Rob?
Yep. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention.
Yeah, this is an interesting drinker. I think all of us probably at a point in time in our lives could probably point to that and say, yep, I think I was a hard drinker at some point in time. And maybe I had the ability to stop for a period of time. But probably it would be in that gray area of somebody that is developing into being an alcoholic. May not be. There are people out there that I know. I have a friend of mine that it's a distant friend, but he prides himself on the amount of alcohol he takes in, and at the same time he does have the ability to stop for a month at a time, and he does that on an annual basis. I don't know if you guys know of the sober October type of approach to things, although I don't know that he necessarily picks October to be his month, but I do know in the past that he has taken a month off completely and had no issues or problems with that. But nonetheless, when he does drink, he is considered, in this case, basically a hard drinker. Now, the important point here is that this is damaging the health and of this person, both physically and mentally. I think it's one of those areas where, like I said before, where we can point to a point in time in our life where we probably were the hard drinker or heavy drinker, and for at least a period of time, whether that be a week or a month or whatever, we were able to stop for a period of time. Now, I say that because it's easy to transition and say, well, an alcoholic can also stop for a week or two or more and be able to weather that. And we kind of call that white knuckling kind of phase. So this one's one of those where it kind of straddles the type of person that's just a hard drinker and the type of person that's really developing into being an alcoholic. So I think we can all point to that and say, yep, it's probably an in-between. There are a number of people that stay on the side that is a hard drinker. And then there are some people that continue to progress in their own disease and alcoholism and find themselves becoming alcoholic. I think it's important to also point out that this is something that is at the advice of a doctor. For example, this person can probably stop and probably stay stopped for an extended period of time, if not forever, even though they may struggle with it mightily as they're going forward. Okay. Rob, let's talk about the real alcoholic.
Okay, page 21, everybody. But what about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. But at some stage of his liquor career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink.
Yeah. And so now we're really talking about the person that is unable to stop. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't stop for a day, a week, or a month. And we've all kind of been in that capacity, especially at the time. And I can point to this for me as a real alcoholic, and is that I could stop for a month, and then somehow, some way, I found myself with alcohol in my hand, and I was drinking again. And this was at the later stages of my attempts to stop drinking, where I was relapsing on about a monthly basis. It wasn't really able to, I hadn't, tapped into my higher power and found that inner strength that was able to give me the ability to actually stop and stay stopped. But I also want to point out that this is the first time that real is used in the book. It's nothing, you hear people say that they're a real alcoholic when they introduce themselves, and that's fine. It certainly is a term that is used in the big book. But when we just talk about I'm an alcoholic, there's no discerning difference in being a real alcoholic or just being an alcoholic. The fact is you are an alcoholic either way. But there's nothing wrong with calling yourself a real alcoholic or just calling yourself an alcoholic. I just wanted to make that distinction. The big thing here is you've lost all control, okay? We're not at the point of doing our first step, but we're getting close. We have actually moved into a capacity where we have lost all control of our ability to not drink. We have allowed the alcoholism to finally be full-fledged and front and center. And it is a place where even if you are able to stop for just a few days, for example, that you're basically just white knuckling it, and you're just being a dry drunk at that point in time. But no sooner than a month or three, you're right back at it, and it is as bad or worse at that point as it was a month or three earlier. Okay, Rob.
Yeah, and Leo, I was just going to throw in that here they're talking about the allergy, the phenomenon of craving, that the doctor had spoken about earlier in his chapter. Is that, but at some stage of the liquor drinking career, and I love how they put it as a career. You know, it's a full-time job that we have, a career. He begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. So any liquor that's taken into his body, that's when he can't control the amounts that he's taking, which is what just backs up what the doctor had talked about. Remember, this is the first 100 that got sober. This is their ideas, and this is what they found themselves going through. So we're on page 21, everybody. Here is the fellow who's been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. He is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day, and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. He has a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. He is often perfectly sensible and well balanced concerning everything except liquor, but in that respect, he's incredibly dishonest and selfish. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, and has a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. He is the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around, yet early next morning he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. Then comes the day when he simply cannot make it, gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to a doctor, gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums.
Yeah, what a bleak situation that we're looking at here. This is a very long paragraph, and there's a lot to unpack here. First and foremost, it's been puzzling you, especially in the lack of control. That's the baffling feature of alcoholism, as we've normally usually say that, and we've all experienced that, where we find ourselves drinking and then looking around going, how the heck did I get here? And that is really one of the first kind of indications that you have, in fact, lost control. Doing absurd and incredible tragic things while drinking. It's whether you're talking and saying things that are just damaging as all get out to people or others, to acting out in either anger or frustration, or in some cases, just doing silly, stupid things that wouldn't normally be something that you would do, and it embarrasses other people, that to family members especially, being around you when you do things like that. A real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Yeah, if we're talking here about a person that normally, when they're not drunk, which is again at this point in time in the phase or stage that they're in, is rare, but when they're not drunk, they can be as pleasant and as alert and kind as anybody out there. They can, in fact, as they talk about here, hold down a good job, and for a period of time that is under control. They are at times, when they're not drinking, attentive to their family, which is probably a little bit awkward at best, when you've got here's this person being, attentive to their family, but the family is basically just biding their time. They're uncomfortable, they're anxious, they're nervous, and they know that it's just a matter of time before this person starts drinking again, and then the cycle starts all over again, and they become disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial, which then at that point in a lot of cases, they become withdrawn. They don't want to be around their family. They're not considering their family. They're acting out, and like we said earlier, could be saying some very damaging things. And it starts to get to that point where family members don't want to go to other events with this person. They may avoid friends and family that they normally used to have outings and gatherings with. This person becomes incredibly selfish about their lives, and there's a lot of this, just leave me alone. I just want to be myself. You guys are bothering me, you're hounding me, you're nagging me, et cetera, and it just gets out of control from there. So the other part of this is that there's a lot of hiding and lying. We are at a stage and point. I'll raise my hand and say that I was identified with this, and that is that I in fact was somebody that hid my alcohol, and I would try and drink privately, and hopefully not let anybody know that I was drinking. And for that, I would get caught every time, 100% of the time. As soon as I started drinking, I would tell you that the guilt and remorse that would just wash over me would be there. And it was no fun, but I found myself drinking nonetheless. There was no enjoyment left. Now, with regard to sedatives, prescription drugs, that type of thing, hasn't been my experience, but I do know that Bill, in fact, Bill W. did, in fact, kind of go through a phase where the doctor, in order to try to get them some sleep, gave him some sedatives, and he just essentially decided to combine that with his alcohol, and in doing so, found himself getting even worse. And this person finds themselves now what they then called hospitals and sanitariums. We now call rehab facilities, treatment centers, et cetera. And that's where they find themselves going in order to try and spend some time, whether it's 30 or 90 days, et cetera, to dry out and to try to get some level of treatment and psychological and physical health to try and get ahead of this. Rob?
Yeah, Bill, in Bill's story, he became a lone wolf. Nobody wanted to be around him because he was just, he'd get insanely drunk. And the thing is that the personality changes. There was one gentleman that I knew, mild mannered gentleman, but get liquor into him, and then he turned into, a crazy man. And what happens is that we have to separate ourselves from people like that. We isolate because we can't control the amounts that we take. So what happens is we start to isolate. I know that I isolated in my basement, tried to push everybody away from me so that I could drink the way I wanted to drink. I didn't want people saying, don't you think you've had enough? Do you really need another one? The frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices, we learned earlier in the book. Bill became a lone wolf. Rob became a lone wolf and tried to do everything on his own. What happens is the family, start doing things on their own. They don't include you. They don't even think about you anymore because you're an embarrassment. Well, Mom, does Dad have to come? Because, he usually drinks too much, and then, either gets into a fight or he does something that embarrasses me. So these are things that, our family have to put up with. This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary, but this description should identify him roughly. Why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle, with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it that he takes that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and the willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters?
There's a couple of questions here. We're getting close to defining what we're going to call as the malady. And one of the two symptoms of alcoholism that plagues us all and is a descriptor for us, but that is what we're kind of driving towards, and that is that baffling feature of not being able to stay away from that first drink. So there's, like I said, a couple of questions here. The one thing about this book is that they are going to answer those questions specifically. So we'll just keep going in regards to that. One thing I want to point out is that I have sat down with my laptop and my battery is low, so I'm going to have to run and grab my power cord. So Rob, if you want to read for just a little bit, and then
Yeah, and I'll throw a couple of comments in here too, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
Okay, you go get what you need. We'll sing a song or you do something in the meantime. You know, the whole thing is that what has become of the common sense and willpower? These are what normal people think because they can leave the drink alone. Why can't he? Okay, we'll read more about that later on. But this is what, where is my willpower? I simply don't know. What happened to it? In other matters that work, family, thing, I usually succeed at a lot of the things. I do well. But when it comes to alcohol, I am baffled at why I can't stay sober. Why is it that when I take the first drink that I keep having to take more? Because we've read the big book, we understand that there's an analogy, the phenomenon of craving, that once I take any alcohol whatsoever into my system, my body craves more. So I just keep going. But before I learned this, I was baffled. I couldn't figure it out. I just knew that once I started drinking, I couldn't stop. And the crazy part is, I didn't want to take that first drink, but I always ended up taking that first drink. Why? Well, we're going to find out more about the malady. Perhaps there never will be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We're not sure why. Once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer the riddle. Don't forget to unmute, Leo.
Thank you very much. So we are getting into, and I heard Rob at the last minute, they're talking about the fact that we are going to be getting into the malady and defining that. We can't answer this riddle. Even one alcoholic to another. We can talk about the malady and the allergy. We can talk about alcoholism and whatnot. But what is it that triggers us to become alcoholic? I know that we've got a great description that Bill does for us, Bill S. from New Jersey, and I won't even come close to attempting that, but I think it's one of the most excellent descriptions of alcoholism I've ever heard. But nonetheless, we are in that baffling feature, and we'll continue to talk about that as we go along. But bottom line is that once it's got a hold of us, there's no letting go. There's just you've got to be able to tap into that higher power. It's something bigger than us individually and collectively, and we have to find that inner strength in order to combat the defense against that first drink, and then not drinking after that. Rob?
Yeah, we're not sure why. Once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. When did I cross that invisible line and become the alcoholic where the allergy and the malady took over? I can't control myself from not taking that first drink. And once I take that first drink, the allergy kicks in and I can't control the amount. I wish I knew, when I crossed that line, because I spent too many years over that line, going on, trying to quit, not being able to. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this.
Yeah, and that's just basically saying what we've already started saying, and that is that somebody can actually stop for a period of time, and the progression of the disease continues to progress even if we aren't drinking. And I think part of that too is that as we get older, our metabolism slows down. There's some biological features of our disease that also enter into the equation and causes us an inability to actually take in and combat the effects of alcoholism or of alcohol. I'm sorry. But no matter what, the alcoholic, no matter when they stop and when they start back up, they are affected both mentally and bodily, as we are going to find out in more detail coming up. Rob?
Yeah, Leo, I would quit for a few days, and then I would reward myself with a few drinks.
Oh yeah.
Then this terrible cycle starts all over again, and the craziness. Page 23 at the top, everybody. And the next few lines that I'm going to read are eye openers. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bouts create. They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. If you are drawing this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, you will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk.
Yeah. And I'll just point out that I was one of those that became irritated and refused to talk. I would just really do this withdrawal from other people and just want them to leave me alone. But back to what Rob was talking about, the observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took that first drink. Well, first and foremost is that is one of the requirements of being truly, alcoholic is you've got to drink. If you never, ever take that first drink, then you've not set off the allergy and therefore the cycle of drinking uncontrollably and with a lot of damage going forward. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. And that is, again, we're talking about the malady and that defense against that first drink. If you're able to not drink for extended periods of time, meaning that forever, then you're not alcoholic. But if you're just, like we said, taking a few days, a few weeks, maybe even a few months. I know that when I was in combat, it was a big deal to not drink during the time that you were in country and in whatever scenario that you were in. And I adhered to that. And I would go months without taking a drink. Not that I didn't want to drink, but I would go months without drinking. In part, I just didn't allow myself to be around it and didn't have it available. But as soon as I got back, and things were back to normal with regard to what I mean by normal. I was not in a combat situation. I was not overseas, etc. I would take that first drink of a beer, and that was it. And luckily for those around me, for the first few days, I would drink moderately, and but it would be hard, and I could do it, but then at that point, I would do that stepping off. I would fall, and it wasn't gracefully falling, and I would just start drinking. And I would just basically offer up excuses on top of excuses, something akin to Rob, rewarding myself because I went so many days, months, or whatever without drinking. All of us, I think, have been there where we've been able to take a few days off. We probably celebrated and drank, or we just found ourselves upset about something. I know that there's a lot of people that will say that they're under stress. They're angry about something, they had a bad day at work or whatever. And so they deserve a drink. And all of those reasons are wrong. And I'll just put it that way. But the really, the honest answer here is they really have no excuse and or reason for why they're drinking. They have no idea why they're drinking. And again, this is for somebody that doesn't understand alcoholism, that is an alcoholic that we're talking about. With that, we'll go ahead and keep moving forward. Rob?
Yeah, Leo, you were talking about having a bad day at work. Well, you know what? I had a good day at work and I drank. I got promoted at work. I got, we come up with any excuse to give us a reason why we took that drink, but the most important part here is, therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. So you know what? Because I know that once I take alcohol in my system, I'm off to the races. So I got to stop myself from taking that first drink, but I don't know how. So I'm sure they're going to tell us somewhere in here, aren't they?
They sure are.
And also, you bring this to the attention of the alcoholic, he'll laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. The reason being, because the alcoholic doesn't understand why they're doing it either. They have no mental defense against that first drink. Once in a while, he may tell the truth, and the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about this a little bit. One is that if they are actually being honest, they are going to tell you that they have no reason why they understand. They don't understand why they're drinking. They just know that they're drinking, and that's part of life. It's woven into the fabric of their existence. And I used to make that excuse. I was a Marine. By gosh, Marines work hard and we play hard, and the alcohol was an integral part of our lives and our culture, and it was expected that you would drink, and not only drink, but drink a lot. And not only drink a lot, but that would result in whatever would happen, which could be a lot of wrestling, and it could be fighting. We could be doing, shenanigans, and ultimately trashing a bar. It was embarrassing after the fact. But nonetheless, we at the time wore it as a badge of honor. That's just coming from me. But at that point in time, it had a real hold on us. And I would just tell you that at one point in time, I got to this point where I was obsessed, and this is the second obsession that we talk about. And this particular obsession, when they say somehow they will beat the game, means that they will stop drinking and stay stopped with self-will and self-power, which they are unable to do. And it really does mess with the alcoholic at that point, because they think that, oh, I've got it. I've got either a little bit of knowledge, no knowledge. I just know that I'm going to do this. I may have made a promise. I may have taken a Bible and sworn that I was never going to drink again. And there I am at the end of a day or a couple of days, finding myself drinking all over again. So with that, it is, in fact, they are down for the count. They kind of know it, but they're not willing to necessarily admit it, not only admit it to others, but to admit it to themselves. Rob?
Yeah, the whole obsession here is that I will be able to stop on my own. That's how they're going to beat the game. Now, remember, Bill, the first time he came out of treatment, self-knowledge would keep him sober. Kept him sober for a short period of time. Second time he came out of treatment, fear. Okay, he heard Dr. Silkworth tell his wife, Lois, that, you know what, Bill's going to die of delirium tremens if he keeps drinking. So fear sobered him up for a short period of time. Okay, on our own, we are hooped.
And
How
Rob,
true this is.
I'm gonna jump to page 181. I know this is
Okay.
a little out of sync, but we're gonna do that because there's a place near the bottom of the page on Dr. Bob's Nightmare that I think is important here, and it's something that Bob brings up to us, and I'll go ahead and read it.
Go ahead.
If you still think you are strong enough to beat the game alone, that is your affair. But if you really and truly want to quit drinking liquor for good and all, and sincerely feel that you must have some help, we know that we have an answer for you. It never fails if you go about it with one half of the zeal you have been in the habit of showing when you are getting another drink. The point is that we've got an answer. So I want to just kind of point that out at the beginning here as we're kind of going into this. Not only do we understand alcoholism, and we're going to continue to learn more about it, but there is an answer for it. All right, Rob, thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Leo. How true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal, but everybody hopefully awaits a day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will.
Yeah, and this is really just the ability to stop and stay stopped. They're looking at this again. These are folks that are not that well versed in alcoholism. They do know that they're in the midst of an alcoholic, but they don't understand it fully. And so there is that point where we get back to, if he wants to stop, he could stay stopped if he really truly tried. And the fact is you can't. This is just one of those things that has too much of a hold of you, and it's impossible. And other people think, here, the power of will, they're saying to themselves, somehow he's going to figure this out. Somehow he's going to reach his bottom, and he's going to be able to stop and stay stopped no matter what. And we're here to tell you that that's impossible without using a higher power of some kind, and that inner strength that has to be found and capitalized on. Rob?
The tragic truth is that if a man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected.
Yeah, and that's really the point that I would want to emphasize out of this particular paragraph, and that is that we become alcoholic way before we actually admit and or acknowledge it whatsoever within ourselves. Others probably see it before we do, and are living with it and hoping that something will change. But that's the big point here is that you do reach being an alcoholic before you actually realize it, and well before you are willing to admit it. All right, Rob, one of the biggest and best paragraphs of all.
Yep, this next paragraph is in squiggly writing, so they paid extra money for this, so it must be important. So this, to me, is one of the best descriptions of what the malady is. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower has become practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink.
Absolutely without defense against that first strength. And we do forget. We actually can forget in a day of what the calamitous debacles that we had just experienced. And maybe we remember them, but we actually find ourselves not caring and decide that we are somehow going to be able to fix it and do better the next time. And certainly we don't. And in that regard, we have in fact lost the power of choice. And that's really the important point here to make also. And that is that you've lost the power of choice. Completely 100% lost that power of choice. And you find yourself drinking no matter what. Rob?
Yeah, just on page 23, it said that therefore the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. Why is that? Is because we're without defense against the first drink. The almost certain consequences of that follow. Taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they are hazy and readily supplanted with the odd threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. There is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove.
Yeah. Act like other people. It is the holy grail of drinkers. They feel like that they are going to, at this point in time, be able to actually drink like other people. They're going to be normal. They're going to figure it out. They're finally going to put all of this, the problems of alcoholism to rest, and they're going to be normal. And it just never arrives. It's fleeting, and it is always a step ahead of us and completely out of reach. And it does mess with us from time to time, and find ourselves making promises to people right as the same time as we're drinking, and you can just see it in their eyes and their faces that they're already damaged by it, no matter what the attitude is of the alcoholic. Rob?
Yeah, Leo, I'm just going to throw in a couple of things here. And the fact that we know that we have the allergy, the phenomenon of craving. So therefore, we can't take any alcohol whatever into our bodies. Because once we do, we can't control the amount. Think about being allergic to peanuts. When we're allergic to peanuts, our tongue swells up. We end up having to go to the hospital. Okay, the doctor tells us, you know what, you're allergic to peanuts. You know, you can't eat them. So you go home and you say, well, I'm not going to eat peanuts. If you do eat peanuts again and end up back to the hospital and you get the same doctor and the same nurse, they're going to look at you and go, you know you are allergic to peanuts, don't you? And you go, oh yeah, yeah. Where are they going to put you? They're going to put you in a psych ward because you're killing yourself. Okay. Doctors can't see the allergy, okay, of alcohol. But that's why it's up to us. We realize that we have an allergy to alcohol, that once I take any alcohol, whatever, I can't control the amount. Therefore, I need abstinence. Okay. I know that I can't take any alcohol whatsoever into my body, but I've got this malady in my mind that keeps telling me it'll be different this time, Rob. Go ahead, take that drink. You'll be fine. You know, you're not a real alcoholic. You know, you haven't had a drink for 2 days. Go ahead. Then what happens? The whole cycle starts again. So therefore, that's why we talk about it. The main problem is in the mind. So we have to deal with the mind because we know in our hearts of hearts that our only solution is abstinence. So the almost certain consequences of following. Oh, I've read that part, didn't I?
Yep,
I apologize. Sorry about that, everybody. The alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, it won't burn me this time, so here's how. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth, pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, for God's sakes, how did I ever get started again? Only to have the thoughts supplanted by, well, I'll stop with the sixth drink, or what's the use anyhow?
Yeah, what's the use anyhow? It's that giving up and that utter despair that you feel. And I'll point to almost all of us that have been there, where we are looking at a glass of alcohol, whatever it may be, and we're completely baffled, dumbfounded. We are defeated, and we find ourselves just giving up and saying, what the heck, I'm just going to drink. Maybe I'll stop after I finish this bottle. Maybe I'll stop when I get to the sixth drink, as they say here, whatever it may be. The fact is you probably won't stop at that point. The only time you do stop is on a couple occasions of either running out of alcohol or you completely black out and are incapacitated and unable to drink at that point in time. And pounding the bar, pounding the table, pounding whatever, your head, you're in that place, and it is just defeating and despairing. Rob?
Yeah, it makes me think of Bill's story, Armistice Day, 1934, when Bill, was out. He's going to go golfing that day, and then circumstances took him to a different place, and he ends up going into a bar. It's Armistice Day. Bartender puts a drink on the table. He takes it without even thinking. And there he's off to the races again. It's all in the mind. We don't think about it. When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history, but for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop, but cannot.
Yeah. Important point here, alcoholism has you don't have it. So just to make a point here with regard to what we're talking about here is that it has you don't have it. Placing himself probably beyond human aid, unless he's locked up, may die or go permanently insane. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history, and that is a fact. I think it's a point to make here is that we are the lucky ones, and I mean sincerely the lucky ones. We've been able to find that inner strength, that higher power, and rise above this dark place that alcoholics find themselves in, and all of us that have wanted to stop and cannot are we can identify with it, and there are still many more. The percentages are astounding as to how many alcoholics there are out there that are untreated and haven't found the solution as we have. Rob?
Yeah, we've been talking about some dark and depressing things so far, but now let's get into some positive. And it's squiggly writing, so we got to pay attention to it. They paid extra for this. There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed.
Absolutely. And we're talking everything from the solution to step one is step two, and here is step two. Almost none of us have liked the self-searching and the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings. That's steps 4, 5, and 6. And but we saw that it really worked in others. And that's one of the important points here, is that we've looked around. We found somebody that we were like, holy cow, I want what they have, and I've got to figure out how best to do that. And the good news is that by and large, those that have recovered and have found this ability to tap into an inner strength and a higher power are more than happy to share what they did, what they went through, and how they became recovered as far as alcoholism is concerned. And there was nothing left to do but to pick up this little simple plan and work through it. And it does require work, so that's another important piece here. And it does in fact work. Not for everybody, and I've said this in the past that AA it works for a lot of people, but there are several other ways to recover, and some people do in fact recover using different methods. It just happens to be what works for us, and that's why we're here, and we are sharing it with others. And certainly it is going to continue to work for others as well, as we find them and as they find us. Rob?
Yeah. Here's something that we have to pay attention to. When therefore we were approached, it's up to us to go to other people and offer them this solution.
Step 12.
Okay, exactly. Step 12 is all through the book here, and go and help another alcoholic. Why? Because it helps us. Okay, but also the other thing is to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. There are an awful lot of spiritual tools that we have been given in the book. We'll come up with more of them as we keep reading. Okay, when you have a toolbox, you have a hammer, you have a screwdriver, you have all different tools. Okay, if you got a screw, you can use a hammer to put the screw in, but it's not the correct tool to use. Okay, there are going to be tools that they're going to teach us here. When we have fear, what tool do we use? When we have resentments, what tool do we use? There's tons of tools that we're going to come up with in this book. Okay, look for them, and if not, I'll make sure that I, try to bring them out into the light. The great fact is just this and nothing less: that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves.
Absolutely. And this is a great paragraph to just emphasize the fact that the higher power is there if you search and find it and work with it. And that is a fact that all of us have experienced and are sharing in today and as we go forward. And I think that that's important. Back to Rob's point of approaching, being approached by those in which the problem has been solved, that is us. That problem has been solved, and we are have this whole new attitude towards life, towards our fellows, and towards God's universe. It's important to note that, and there's a quick sentence on page 89 at the very beginning, and it says, practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. So I say all of that to say that here we are, we found that higher power, we've been able to tap into that inner strength, we've been able to overcome the malady and the allergy, obviously, and that is something that we can carry forward to others. And there are others that are searching for this and are just waiting for us to find them and to give them this gift as we've been given ourselves. Rob?
Yeah, Leo, it is 12:52. Did you want to bring Bill from New Jersey in now?
Yeah, I think this is a really good place
Perfect.
to stop and have Bill come in. So thank you, Bill, and thank you, Rob.
Yeah, hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. And thanks a lot, Leo and Rob. Good job here. This is a real good chapter. The name of it is There Is a Solution. And that's basically what they're telling us here. This book is telling us what the solution is. First thing, it started off when we started reading. This book was giving us a description of alcoholism. Basically what it does to you, how it affects you, and you can use that as a way, if you want, of determining whether or not you really are an alcoholic or not. It's giving you some information on there. It told us that we lost our choice in drink. In other words, something in our brain makes us drink against our will. I don't want to drink. I don't want to drink. I don't want to drink. The next thing I know, I'm drinking. That's definitely a characteristic of an alcoholic. That's what happens when you turn into an alcoholic. You drink against your will. And he's telling us here also what the solution is. Right on page 25 in the second paragraph. We have had deep and effective spiritual experiences. That's the solution to alcoholism, is having a spiritual experience. Some people have a spiritual awakening. They're actually both the same thing. One happens in a short period of time, and one happens over a longer period of time. That's the only difference. They both do the same thing, the spiritual experience or the spiritual awakening. And that's basically what our solution is. That's AA's solution to alcoholism. That's why we go through the steps. The steps are designed to give us the spiritual awakening. The first part of step 12 is one of the best promises in this program. It says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. That's telling us that because we've gone through the steps, we will have a spiritual awakening. And the spiritual awakening will be significant enough to bring about recovery from alcoholism. That's basically what the solution is. And so what this chapter is telling us, it's telling us there is a way out. There is a solution to alcoholism. We're not as hopeless as we think. There is hope, provided we go through the process that's outlined in this book. That's basically what this whole thing is telling us. And we can pick apart all the little details of it, but pretty basically, you take a drink, you develop the phenomenon of cravings, and you can't stop. That's the physical part. They call it the allergy. And after you progress a little bit past that, you get into the mental part where you don't want to drink and you drink against your will. And once you take a drink against your will, you develop the phenomenon of cravings and you can't stop. So basically, we have two things going on here with this. We're addicted to alcohol in our brain, and our body has a physical allergic reaction to alcohol. And once you're addicted to it, when your brain is addicted, that's where the addiction is. It's in your brain. It's not in your foot. You know, it's not my foot is addicted. That's why it makes me walk to the liquor store. No, my brain is addicted, and my brain tells my feet to take me to the liquor store, even though I don't want to go there. That's where the main problem is. And here it says the main problem centers in the mind. The mind, the brain, they're both synonymous. They mean basically the same thing. Once your brain is addicted, the addicted part of your brain overrides your common sense and your willpower and your choice. Because the addictive part of your brain can bully the rest of your brain around and tell your brain, shut up. When your willpower kicks in, the addicted part of your brain tells your willpower to shut up. And so that stuff just doesn't work. Willpower does not work when you have some kind of a affliction. If you think willpower works, next time you're chopping up an onion, use the willpower so that your eyes don't water. Willpower doesn't work for physical things. All right, that's all I got. Thanks a lot for letting me share.
Thanks so much, Bill. Bill has his own Big Book study on Fridays at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So the information's in the chat.
All right, Rob, let's go ahead and close out with the Serenity Prayer, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
Sounds perfect. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.